Beneath the serene Yorkshire Dales in England lies a labyrinth of limestone passages known as the Mossdale Caverns. For decades, this network of caves has been a magnet for caving enthusiasts, drawn by its challenging terrain and the allure of the unknown. But on June 24, Mossdale became the setting for one of Britain's most tragic caving disasters. Described as the Everest of caves, it was not for the faint-hearted. On that fateful day in June, 6 experienced cavers, John Ogden, Jeff Workman, David Adamson, Michael Ryan, Michael Almond, and Colin Vickers embarked on an ambitious exploration. Their goal? To push further into the caverns than anyone had before. At this point in the day, the men were starting their crawl through the Far Marathon Passage. This claustrophobic tunnel is the length of 3 football fields over 900 feet of narrow rock with a light stream of water along the bottom. Far Marathon Passage must be maneuvered in a single direction because it's only 18 inches by 12 inches, barely enough room for an average-sized person to pull themselves along. Imagine crawling in a space not much bigger than your computer screen. Shoulders pinned forward without room to spread your arms or reach back to your waist or legs. Turning around is not an option. Once you squeeze in, you are committed for at least an hour. Near Marathon and Far Marathon are each 900 feet long crawls. There is a small 5-foot area between the two where a caver can partially stand before starting the next section. As the men reach the last section of Far Marathon, there is a further narrowing and a tight squeeze to push yourself through. The goal was to reach this next section of the caving system to clear out passages for further mapping. The men entered the cave around midday, unaware that a storm was brewing. Heavy rain began to lash the dales, turning streams into torrents. Mossdale Caverns, notorious for its susceptibility to flooding, quickly became a death trap. At some point, the water levels became disturbing. The men would have heard the increasing volume of flow, as well as felt the rising water at their feet. Knowing they were 3 hours from the entrance, the decision was made to end their work for the day. Dave knew this cave system better than anyone, so they were sure he would know when to lead them out safely. Unfortunately, they had no idea just how much water was coming their way. Above ground, the storm intensified. Water surged through the limestone passages, rapidly rising within the caverns. The 6 men were deep inside, unaware of the impending danger. The men were moving back up the Far Marathon Passage. This extreme distance in such a confining chamber was likely panic-inducing with such a heavy stream of water coming at them. All their experience told them to move calmly but efficiently to get through this intimidating reality. Sure, they would emerge on the other side in a higher chamber. Young Michael and experienced Jeff were the first 2 to squeeze through the tight starting section of the return. A body could barely fit through portions of this passage. The cavers had to literally squeeze themselves past the rock and pull themselves forward with just their arm strength. Their rubber boots would be towing along the sides to help leverage forward as fast as possible. This time, the water would be coming right at their faces instead of following behind. Jeff Boireau was familiar with the ebb and flow of water at Mossdale. Surely he knew that a swift effort in Far Marathon would get he and Michael safely beyond the risky passage and into the larger chamber above. The other 4 men would have been gathering their gear and preparing for their own entrance into Far Marathon. Now the water flow was becoming more alarming. Dave Adamson was confident that he knew where to wait out the flash flood from the storm. These experienced cavers began their push with all haste in mind. Jeff and Michael began struggling with the flood of water they were facing in the tight passage. It rose above their hands and then their shoulders. They tried to find the highest crack in the passage to lift their faces as the water rushed into the tunnel. Michael would have asked Jeff what to do, where to go. The amount of water flooding into the narrow passage was only increasing with no safe place to escape. The haunting truth was that there was nothing that they could do. Dave had led the others into this same cramped tunnel, hoping to beat the increasing water flow. As they moved through Far Marathon, they encountered the same devastating reality that their friends had just faced. The water was too high. Outside the cave, a full rescue effort was beginning. It was clear that the entrance to the cave was completely blocked by a lake of water, but there was still hope that the men had found a safe chamber to wait in until the water levels fell. On Sunday afternoon, a full day after the men entered the cave, rescuers were able to make it down to Farm Marathon. They shouted a few times, hoping to alert the men that the passage was now clear and they could come down from their high waiting chamber. It wasn't until 2 sets of legs were seen protruding from the ridge of the tunnel that the grim reality was revealed. These 2 bodies were Jeff and Michael, who had lifted their upper bodies into a ridge along the path to try to access the last breaths of air. The reality of this situation was completely devastating to rescuers, who held to a slender thread of hope that these experienced cavers were able to find salvation in an air pocket. One by one, the bodies of 5 men were discovered. John Ogden's body would not be found for another 2 days. He had wedged himself so aggressively into the overhead crack, it took dozens of passers to locate his contorted remains. All 6 men drowned in an inescapable flash flood that filled the entire cavern with water. The cave was closed after this tragedy and remains the final resting place for the 6 men. In 1970, friends of the cavers entered the closed system to move the bodies to an upper chamber. It was renamed a sanctuary. Today, Mossdale Cavern stands as both a memorial and a warning. The site is no longer open for exploration, ensuring no one else shares the same fate as the 6 young men.